I'm the 2020 Teacher of the Year. Hi, everyone. Takeru Nagayoshi. I also go by TK, former high school English and research teacher at New Bedford, Massachusetts, and also the Professional Learning Director of Community Events at Panorama Education. That's a lot. And I'm super excited to be here today. And what I'm going to be talking about is that teachers are just like YouTubers. And before I lose you, because I know that's a cheeky and also a potentially cringeworthy comparison to make, hear me out. Right? Let's talk about the broader context of where educators are right now, because it's no secret that if you have been in the classroom, if you're a teacher, a school leader, that teachers are not okay right now. Because over the course of the pandemic, we have been asked to go above and beyond to meet all these unrealistic expectations and demands, oftentimes without this sense of respect and dignity that should be afforded to teachers, right? This is just one example of many articles that I'm sure a lot of us have seen. But according to this survey, don't really know what it is, 1 in 4 teachers are thinking about leaving the classroom at this end of the school year, citing things like the working conditions and how difficult it's been to be a teacher these past few years. And there's this additional talk of this national teacher shortage that is looming across the horizon. And so in many ways, we are in this national crisis right now. But if you've been in the classroom, right, if you've been an educator for a couple of years, you know that this idea of a teacher shortage, it's nothing new. It's always been a part of the conversation, right? Teacher turnover, for instance, has always been really big, especially amongst young educators. There's the famous statistic about how most young educators leave the classroom within the first 5 years, right? A statistic that's oftentimes magnified when we talk about low-income communities of color. And while there's a million reasons as to why an educator might leave the classroom and why it's so hard to recruit and retain educators, I think one thing that I'd like to focus on for this TED Talk is this collective perception, right, of the profession, the public image of a teacher, if you will, and the impact that how we look and perceive teachers is having on how we can retain and attract and recruit educators into the profession. So what do I mean by that? I'm sure we've all heard of this wonderful, and I'm being ironic, quote before, those who can do, those who can't teach. Raise your hand if you've heard this before. It is a cheap punchline used to denigrate the teaching profession. And it's also meant to imply that teachers are failed artists, they are failed creatives within their field of expertise, right? And it's also, unfortunately, as evidenced by these hands, a ubiquitous expression, right? That reminds us that by and large, society does not recognize, respect teachers in the ways that they should be. And most alarmingly, right, it's a damaging expression. I don't have a slide on this, but I remember seeing a study in 2017. It was for high school students about what kind of profession that they wanted to be. And only 5% of graduating seniors indicated any interest of wanting to become a teacher, citing reasons like lack of prestige, lack of respect, as the primary reasons for why they don't want to enter the profession. And so, at least how I'm seeing it, right? Part of this challenge that we have when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to retaining our educators, right, is how we're collectively seeing teachers, because this is that reality, right? It's not cool to be a teacher in the United States, which is such a shame because teachers are so freaking awesome, and I would have used a different word had it not been for that camera over there. And if there's anything, right, that I know about teachers, it's that they're the most creative, they're the most innovative, they are the most trailblazing people who use the classroom as a canvas to inspire our future. And the more I think about this, the more frustrated I become, because that is not the reality of how people look at educators. And so, going back to my conceptual framework, right? This is why it's important that we look at how teachers are just like YouTubers, right? We're the original content creators when you think about it. And I think that by nurturing the artistry, the creative passion, the intellectual brilliance that educators bring to the space, right, we can reimagine the education profession to attract and to retain and to recruit the most brilliant minds, right, that the profession deserves. And so let's break this down. What do I mean by this? How are teachers like YouTubers? So here's my first point. We know how to engage, right? Good YouTubers, good teachers, we are masters of engaging a crowd. We know how to work an audience, and we draw people in by investing them in our production, in our process, in our work. And it's no surprise when you think about it, because when you get to do what you love, oftentimes that love, that passion is contagious, right? Total side note, when pandemic happened, schools closed, when I was thinking about how to engage my audience through a screen, the first people that I looked to were content creators online, right? Streamers, right? Because when you think about it, they are the literal experts on knowing how to engage an audience, whether it's looking directly into the camera to establish a sense of connection, intimacy, and rapport, to looking through the comments to get a sense of what we should do for our next project and video, right? Asking thought-provoking questions to push the discourse. YouTube and online content creators and teachers are masters at engaging people. Second point, we are reflective practitioners, right? We really like to reflect on our crowd. Good teachers love to reflect on their crowd. After a bad lesson, for instance, when I feel like things just suck, and they happen a lot, I love to take my students and ask what didn't go well. I would give them surveys and ask for feedback. I would look through their products and think about what I could have done better to get a better result. And I think it's not too different from what YouTubers and content creators do. Whether it's them looking at their comments to see what their audience is saying, whether it's looking at their video engagement metrics, or looking at the social media algorithms to tweak what they have to do, right? We love to reflect on our practice because we love what we do, right? That's our craft. Number 3. We center our audience. When I say audience for teachers, we know what we're talking about. We're talking about our students, right? Teachers and content creators, we let our audience drive our work, and our students are always the core part of our experience. So one of my favorite YouTube web series, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, it is the Epic Rap Battles of History. Super cheesy, but they do this thing where they have fictional rap battles between historical and pop culture figures. Think about Albert Einstein versus Stephen Hawking, Frederick Douglass versus Thomas Jefferson, and it's completely satirical, but they weave in these little historical facts and factoids, and alongside the way, they educate their audience. But here's another reason why I bring this, in addition to the fact that it's educational and informative. They have this tagline at the end of their video where they ask their viewers, right, who's next? You decide, right? Who won? Who's next? You decide. And the reason why I bring that up is because I think it underscores a lot of what we teachers do, right, that make our content engaging. And it's that by giving choice and ownership to our audience, right, it allows us to actually authentically engage with our audience in a way that is meaningful and culturally responsive to who they are, right? And again, it's that core concept of a lot of what good teachers do, making learning fun by centering their students, centering their audience. In other words, good online content creators put their audience experience at the forefront of their work, much like how good teachers center students in every part of that teaching and learning process. And by the way, something really important, right, that we all should be doing, especially after the pandemic, when so many of our students are feeling disengaged and disheartened and also removed from that experience. And I already gave my slide away, but yeah, here's the 4th point. We are really good at building community, right? Good teachers, good YouTubers, we use our online community, our classroom community, right? The craft of what we do is the vehicle through which we bring together and inspire action that is oftentimes greater than the sum of its parts. I think I have a slide for this, right? Take, for instance, MatPat. So this is a YouTuber who leads the Game Theory channel, right? Or the Game Theory channel. And he does this thing where he would essentially use science and math to absurdly scientifically accurate lengths to analyze video game and pop culture. So for instance, like he would look at like the pixel dimensions in a Super Mario game and then translate that to real life to ascertain the actual height of Mario. He's like 9 foot or something, by the way. But in doing so, right, what he's doing to an entire audience is engaging and investing them to play with the language of academia, to play with the language of science, right? And essentially build a community. And oftentimes, right, he also uses that power, that community that he builds to find some sort of collective goal, whether it's to raise awareness for cancer or some kind of charity stream. And he's been able to create this large community of theorists, he calls them, that's inclusive of young kids to teens and even adults like me, right? When I think about creators like MatPat, it's not so different from the wonderful creators that I've come across, and I'm talking about teachers here. So for instance, Mr. Dan Adler, right? This is an educator. He's a middle school science teacher in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and he loves to remix catchy songs and use like scientific puns and factoids and has all of his students singing them. I also think about educators like Ms. Shantae Alves, a pre-K inclusion teacher in Boston. She calls her students, like any good online influencer that has a following, has their community named. Her students are owls. And for her, family engagement and community, right, is the core driver of how she builds a community beyond and outside of her classroom. I also think about educators like Miss Jessica Lander. You see her in the middle over here. And she was so inspired by the community and the rich immigration history in Lawrence, Massachusetts. She's a social studies high school teacher in Lowell, Massachusetts, that she and her former students went across the country and had thousands of students and educators write testimonies to tell what their story of being in America is, and it's called the We Are America Too project. And it's a great example, I think, right, about how content creators and teachers, right, regardless of what their canvas is, be it the classroom or, you know, the YouTube platform, again, we have this way of creating something alongside other people that is always larger than the sum of its parts. You might be thinking, well, how do you know all these wonderful teachers? Well, that is my final and last point about YouTubers and teachers. We collaborate, right? We love to be in learning communities, spaces like this where we exchange ideas, share best practices, and learn how we can be there for our students and advocate for one another, right? I think about all of the wonderful professional spaces that I've been a part of, right? Collaborative spaces that I discovered, oftentimes in toy spaces as well, where the greatest teachers, like the greatest content creators, are risk takers, right? They take a set of parameters, and that might be the Common Core standards or whatever your district standard is. If you're a YouTuber, maybe it's like the video algorithm rules that you're governed by. And rather than looking at those as limitations, we always find ways to adapt, to inspire, to find creative solutions within them, not in spite of them. And so when the school shut down, when there were protests happening all over, even as we are going through still a global pandemic in many ways, right? You can still bet that teachers, right, content creators, right, we are the ones who are going to be pioneering for creative ways to make a difference in the world, right? You know what the best part about this teacher and YouTuber paradigm is? Kids are obsessed with YouTube. Like, they are obsessed with YouTube. I'm not lying, right? If you ask a kid what they want to be when they grow up, it is not a lawyer, it is not an astronaut, it is not a musician or an MTV pop star or any of the things that you and I probably thought of growing up. It is literally, right, a YouTuber slash vlogger. This is based off a 2019 survey of 3,000 students ages 8 to 12, and a third of our students, our kids, chose being a YouTube star as their dream job. And so I know I'm being cheeky when I say YouTubers are like teachers, teachers are like YouTubers, but I think there's a strategic implication in making that connection. Because if we can convince our kids to see teachers as the creatives and the artists that we truly are, maybe we wouldn't have such a difficult time recruiting and retaining people into the profession. And if we expand that message, right, and we can convince our school leaders, if we can convince our policymakers, if we can convince society at large to treat this profession for the creative and intellectual brilliance that it has, maybe we won't have so much of a problem with the recruitment and retention in the educator workforce. I want to take us back to this final point, right? Those who can do, Oh wait, those who can do, right? Those who can't teach. I constantly heard it growing up, sometimes even from my own teachers. And it's an expression that I know, and I know that every single person in this know, to be demonstrably true, false, right? And I know this through my own experience, the wonderful educators that I've met, but the sad reality is that I don't think that everyone else in this country, or not every single person, sees teachers the way that we do. And the danger with this perception is that it has real-world implications and consequences on who joins the profession, how we treat people once they are in the profession, and the ways in which we limit the profession and what it has to offer. And so to me, right, I hope to you as well, right, it's kind of important that we can actually reimagine and redefine what teachers are and what the profession can be, and give it that shine and the sparkles that we give to YouTubers, because after all, teachers are the original content creators. Thank you so much.